Alrighty, what is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome back to the channel for another weekly update. Hope everybody is having a lovely weekend. And with that being said, let's dive into the TA. All right, guys, pretty eventful week this week. We didn't get much to start off the week. We got a whole bunch of, range action, but we did start breaking down to close out the week. And we did close out with this bearish shooting star candlestick right over here. I'm just going to tell you at the very beginning of the video, we are expecting further downside next week. We just broke down from these bearish rising wedges on SPY and QQQ. And across the board, we have bearish setups that call for some further downside. Now, we're going to be talking about the indices. We're going to go over SPY, QQ, IWM, VIX. We're going to go over the Mag 7 stocks, and then I have 5 or 6 trade ideas for you at the end of the video that you can pay attention to, long and short. All right, let's get after it. Let's kick it off with SPY here. We're going to come over here the weekly time frame, and I am going to point out you did close out with this bearish shooting star candlestick. We don't have to go much lower, but I'm going to point out where you're going to be looking for buyers to step in over here on the downside, and I'm just going to say there's a crap ton of confluence in this area. There just is, okay? We're going to come over here. We're going to come back to the daily time frame. Let's just go over the levels first things first, guys. We did break down from that bearish rising wedge. Automatically, guys, we're watching for 593.20 at least, okay? 591.05 to 593.20, that's going to be our demand zone over here. And we don't know if we're going to stop here, but that's at a minimum. That's going to be our downside target for the week, all right? I will not be surprised to see you open up flat and then just continue to fade off of the open underneath 595.54 and come down to 593.20, and I would imagine 591.05 is at least going to be hit. So that is going to be the downside target for the week, that zone. All right, upside levels, guys, we're talking 597.59. That's a level derived from the 4-hour chart over here. 597.59, 599.52, which is right up here. 601.85, 603.72, 605.37. I don't think we're going to march our way back up here unless somehow Trump is going to, come together with a deal over here saying he's saving the world. He's protecting the world from World War III because that's what he does, All right, he puts together his deals. Unless that happens, I do think we're going to get further downside. I don't think the situation is going to de-escalate. And I think the market had a sell setup over here. We had the 4-hour bearish divergences going on over here on QQ. We had the rising wedge pattern. You failed to break above the rising wedge pattern over here on QQ. You did it on SPY. Okay, you did it on SPY with how we had it drawn over here. All right, you had this going on right over there, and as you can see, we popped right above that. But you can always just, you can see what I'm seeing right over here, okay? Nothing really changed over there, all right? But as far as QQ goes, we did have these 4-hour bearish diverges that I definitely let you know about before this thing happened. I let you guys know about the rising wedges. We did start breaking up. All right, and then we got sucked right back down. We closed within it over here, and then we hit it with the break and retest right here. You actually pulled back to the golden pocket right over here and sold off of that. And, as we could see, you made the lower low. You have another lower high. All it needs to do is take out this low over here, and we're coming straight to 521.95. All right, so as for SPY, we're going to finish going up these levels. You know the upside levels. On the downside, we have 595.54, which aligns with Friday's low. Underneath 595.54, we have 593.20, 591.05, 589.08, and underneath there, we are going to target 583.24 and then the 200 daily moving average. Now, why does this area down here have all of the confluence? Well, you could put together the 200 daily moving average. You could put together the 50 period moving average, which I'll just point out. A lot of the times price does like to pull back. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfectly respected, but we're going to look for, into that area. It just adds another layer of confluence to it. All right, so you have the 50 DMA, you have the 200 DMA, well, you have the EMA over here, 50 EMA, you have the 200 DMA, and then on the weekly time frame, you have the weekly 21 EMA sitting right down there. Now, we also do have this gap sitting wide open down here. On the weekly chart, that gap is 570.31. On the daily chart, that gap is all the way down here at 567.50. Okay, I'm just going to leave it over there on the weekly gap. That's the thing that I think is going to be respected. Regardless, we're looking for further downside, and we're either thinking it's going to bounce here, or you're going to break underneath 591.05. That's going to be your tail right over there, and you're probably at least going to come down here to 580, and then I would imagine a buyer step in there. I don't think it's going to be picture perfect like that, I think we're probably going to put in a base for like 1 to 2 weeks while we're down here, something something that tricks a lot of people, all right, before they send it back up. But that is where I think price is heading. Minimum 591.05 down to 593.20, and then maximum all the way down here 580. I think we would probably get buyers stepping over there. We're going to come over here to QQQ, and I am going to point out you have a very similar setup over here. You broke down from that rising wedge pattern, and now you're sitting in your demand zone. Okay, so this was supply, it is flipped to demand. We did start seeing buyers step in right over here, around here. All right, we had a decent bounce, and it was just like we just pointed out. Okay, it's as far as this is why I think golden pocket is a tool that everybody should be utilizing. Okay, you literally broke down from the rising wedge, you retested it over here, tested the 0.618 fib, broke down to a new low. You gapped down just like you did over there. Okay, and then guess what? All right, you returned right there to the golden pocket, to that 0.618 Fibonacci retracement, and then you sold off of that. Okay, guys, it is a tool that anybody can use. I only show in these videos, how things actually worked. We use volume, we use price action, we use our level, supply and demand, and then we also do use the RSI down here. And the last tool there is going to be the golden pocket. Okay, but let's go over levels over here on the Qs. All right, on the downside, we have 525.97, and then we have nothing until 521.95. Now, I did say if we started losing this area over here, wherever we had our line in the sand marked out, we're going to be looking for a move down to 521.95, because that is going to be your mean reversion to the mean over here, to your daily 21 EMA. All right, on the daily time frame. If 521.95 does not hold, all right, we are going to expect price to move down. And just like SPY, we are going to have a lot of confluence down here in this area. You have the 50 EMA, you have the 200 DMA, and just like SPY, you will have the weekly 21 EMA sitting all the way back down here. So on the weekly chart, we're going to have a complete mean reversion on the table, okay? And, again, unless a deal comes out over the weekend, I do not think this is going to de-escalate. I think it's probably going to continue for a little while. And that's just going to be how it goes. That is what it is. We're going to have a whole new, list of setups when we're down here. A lot of swing setups. We're going to be using the August expiration on calls for swings. All right. But, this can take 1 to 2 weeks to really play out, in my personal opinion. And then, like I said, I think we can just base around here for the next 1 to 2 weeks and then push up. And I think that's going to be the recipe for new highs. Everything's going to reset. All right, so that is that. Mean reversion on the weekly time frame, that means everything across the board is resetting. And I'm going to point out some setups paying attention to when that comes. But, if you're watching these videos consistently, you'll know everything as it's coming out. Okay. But yeah, that's really what we got on the downside. If you break underneath 521.95, we're talking 515.97, 511.93. Okay, we'll just make that not a green level right there. And then underneath 511.93, we have 505.58 and then 501.48, which has the 200 DMA and the weekly 21 EMA sitting right around 500. Okay, those are the downside levels. Now, let's say we get a bounce to start off the week. Honestly, I don't think we are going to. But if we do, look for rejection right over here off of 530.84. You can watch Friday's high over here. If you take out Friday's high, I assume you're probably going to be pushing back up, and this was all a bear trap. Okay, so if you break over 531.87 Friday's high, expected push to 533.82, and then we'll see what happens there. Maybe we get up to 536.78, but at that point, we're coming back up to all-time highs. But we can see buyers are struggling, guys. We can see there is supply sitting all up here. We've been eating these sell orders, and guess what? There's more sell orders than buy orders. That's why price is struggling. That's why it's starting to break down. You notice how we ranged out here. You just broke underneath the range. We're probably coming at least down to 521.95. So that's what I would be expecting this week. Okay. But yeah, that's what you're watching over here on QQ. We're going to move on over here to VIX, and I am going to point out, guys, you did end up seeing a retest down here. You gapped up 20%, you pulled back, tested the daily 21 EMA, tested the 200 DMA, daily moving average right there, and you closed out with that red hammer candlestick. I'm just saying, I do think this thing is going to continue catching a bid here. Doesn't have to go right away, but with what we just talked about in the indices, if QQ is to come down to at least 521.95, I assume VIX is probably going to get a little bit more of a spike here. And as we can see, we closed out with this bullish weekly candlestick over here. It's getting pretty tight over here in this 5-week range. It's likely going to break up. So if you can break above 22.34 next week, I think you're probably going to at least test 24.80, if not 28.32, depending on how the situation develops we talked about, okay? So that's VIX over here, but I wouldn't expect it to just cool off right away. You literally broke above, our trigger level over here, 1880. You gapped well above it. Pull back right to it, guys. If you don't have levels that are giving you reactions, please just take my levels. You could steal them. I give them Monday through Thursday here for absolutely no cost to you. And then you also do have the weekly update, just like we're going over today, going over expected price action, the likely scenarios, okay, bullish and bearish. We go over invalidations in these. All right, I cover the Mag 7 stocks, then I have trade ideas so you can consistently make your money on the hot setups going into the following week. Okay, if you're not a subscriber here, please just remember to hit that subscribe button. Remember, if you want to be notified right away, put on the notification bell. All right. And, of course, I scratch your back all the time. I put hours into this, and especially here on this grease strip, it takes like 2 hours to upload a video. So I have to sit there waiting for that every time. But, nonetheless, normally I'm putting 1 to 2 hours every day into these videos anyway, just making them, come together how you guys are accustomed to them. I try and do my best here. Just please remember to leave a like on the video so we can, see this channel grow over here. I would like to see this channel grow. That's all I ask of you. Absolutely free over here. That's the only cost. Leave a like. I appreciate it so much. Love you guys. All right. But yeah, that's Mr. Vix over here. Coming over here to IWM. Now, this is the only conflicting one over here, guys. We didn't test this 0.618 fib. We didn't test it. All right. So, I'm just saying you're right here at the you're right here at the 21 EMA here on the daily time frame. You rejected right on the dot. I told you guys it made no sense to not hit it when we were sitting right over here. We had CPI. I said it made no sense that we weren't going to hit it. We actually ended up hitting it off the CPI and we faded. All right. We did not hold the move, but we did get a absolute perfect test over there. And now we have a high of 215.93. Well, you see where that 200 DMA is? All right. On this day right here, where was it? 215.89, guys. Okay, that's a reaction within 4 cents right there. 4 cents, almost down to the penny. We got that one. All right, so we took that off over there, and I'm just saying this thing is either going to hold right here at 2803, or it's going to come back down to the weekly 21 EMA. Now, this is the conflicting one. All right, this is the one that makes me think we probably aren't getting much downside over there on the indices, at least not here on IWM. The weekly cloud. All right, as long as you hold over the next few weeks, like you're gonna flip this green. I'm gonna point out all the times where this really happens over here. You broke above it over here, you consolidate for that next week, you pulled back a little bit, and then you rallied the next week. Okay, notice the rejection off the 200 DMA over there. Well, we have a very similar setup right over here, and I am anticipating you find buyers right over here around 206.02. Okay, so expect buyers to hold 206.02. That level is derived from the daily time frame. We got a lot of reactions right around there. But between 201.99 and 206.02, I think buyers are going to defend over here in IWM, and we are going to get a larger bounce up to this at least 0.618 Fibonacci retracement level. If not, we're coming all the way up here towards that 0.786, which aligns with that 230.70 level. Okay, and then if we're going to put on another level, I would say right here. Right above 215.93, we're talking 220.67. Okay, so that is IWM, and that's kind of the reason, I'm leaving it open. Maybe we are going to just get that daily 21 EMA test on SPY QQ, 521.95 on QQQ. That's my main ticker that I trade the Nasdaq. That is what I'm probably the best in the charts at on all these videos. I will go over QQ down to a T, and we have pretty high accuracy there. Either way, we go over the scenarios in these videos, so we kind of cover anything that can happen, and it's up to you as a trader to adjust to those scenarios, but I give you everything ahead of time. All right, but yeah, that's IWM over here. Moving on over here to the Mag 7 stocks, guys. Amazon is pulling back, controlled pullback over here into the daily 21 EMA. Some of these things are making me think, hey, maybe we're not going to roll over right away. Maybe we even just consolidate over here as, the buyers and sellers have a battle. If everything continues pulling back, like, what I was saying, if 521.95 does not hold on QQQ, then I assume 208.81 is not going to hold, and we're going to revisit this area by the 200 DMA and the weekly 21 EMA, which is going to be around 202 to 203. Yeah, we got quite a bit of reactions over here. We got a 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if we come back down, we're expecting a reaction off of that. But the daily 21 is going to be broken at that point. I think it's going to be something like that, and I think the cloud is probably going to remain bullish over here. you know, by the time it gets bought up. So I think this all can happen in 1 week. Honestly, we get up here and we start bouncing back by the next week. I think it's very possible. Okay, possible. But yeah, 1 to 2 weeks of selling, I think it is likely, at least for this all to develop and play out what we're talking about. I think it can take 1 to 2 weeks. I don't think it's something that's just going to be bought up immediately, considering QQ over here is still not down to the 21 EMA. And, you know, with this news, with the bearish structure here, the breakdown with those 4-hour bearish diverges, like we have a recipe to get all the way down here, at least to that mean reversion there on the daily time frame. So that's what I'm going to be looking for, okay? But Amazon, that's really that, guys. You don't got to complicate it. Above 212.88, you have 214.84. If you reclaim 214.84, you're probably running back up to these highs. 218.40, you're going to test 220. You're going to probably push up here to the zone. But again, you're going to need the help from the NASDAQ over here for that to actually happen, okay? Underneath 208.81, you have the 200 DMA. Weekly 21 EMA is also going to be down there. That's Amazon. Coming over here to Meta, guys, you know, I pointed this one out to a T over here. Okay, I hope you guys made some money off of it if anybody traded it. And now I'm going to say, all right, this thing also can get that mean reversion back down to 662.67. I pointed that out once we printed this daily candle right here. I said that is, you know, if the market starts breaking down underneath 688.65, we would be targeting down here at 662.67 to 675.25. We're not yet at 675.25. I am anticipating for the downside over here over the coming sessions. I do think the dip is going to be bought. But, you know, like I was saying, if the market does decide to take that path where we get a larger sell, then yeah, we're probably going to get one of these guys over here. We just printed that. Does that not look exactly like what we have over here? Big, wide body green bar followed by a very narrow range doji candlestick. Well, we can at least get something like that, if not something like that, and that would bring us, you know, decently down here. Okay, that's like 7%. Well, imagine, you know, you gap up a little bit, all right, and then you come down here at 7%, and again, you're reverting to the mean. That is it's the weekly time frame mean reversion. If the daily 21 EMA does not hold over here at 662.67. That is Meta. Apple. All right, Apple started breaking down from this little uptrend it's got going on. I could point that out here on the weekly time frame. If it loads, there you go. You start breaking down. I assume you're going to get that back down here to 189.81 with you know, how this thing is set up and how the market is set up. Okay, so that is Apple. You know, there's really nothing much to talk about over here. We're anticipating further downside if the market's going to sell underneath 196.78. You have nothing till 193.25. I think at least 193.25 is going to be tested. If you test there and quickly get sucked back up and you get all the way back up here and take out 200, I think we're going to target the top of the range up here. That is what I would assume. Okay, so that is Apple. Coming over here to Tesla. Tesla, guys, this is honestly one that I think has a chance of just bouncing back. I'm sorry to say it, but yeah, all right. You guys can see the same weekly chart I'm looking at right now. And, you know, typically when we get this, something like this, where you have a false breakdown and then you shoot right back up. Like, see, you close the week above the 200 EMA, above the weekly 21 EMA. The weekly EMA cloud is still bullish over there. You're about to flip back to green over here on the daily time frame, your EMA cloud. This thing just has to take out 335.50, okay, right over here, Wednesday's high. And you're probably going to start heading up here 355.40 and 373.04. Okay, I think this is something that can move without the market, with how it's set up. But again, you know, if the market is pulling back, put the odds in your favor, be trading in that direction, and you might as well just wait on it. Okay, because you know, if the market pulls back for the next at least like 3 to 4 sessions, not saying that happens, but if it does, well, Tesla very well could do absolutely nothing. You could just waste options premiums right there. You could get killed by theta. All right, so just be patient on it. But honestly, I do think this thing is set up to run. But yeah, that's Tesla. If you do break underneath Friday's low, which, you know, it was a big day over here on Friday. If you do break underneath the low, you're just gonna be watching off for buyers off the 200 DMA. Nothing crazy. Okay, nothing crazy. Coming over here to GOOG. All right, GOOG pulled back to the 200 DMA in the weekly 21 over here on Friday, and you did end up finding bars. I'm just going to put a level off of it. 172.91, guys. Underneath 172.91, you have nothing to 168.24. As we can see on the weekly time frame, that's going to be around the weekly 21. So, you know, if you do pull back over here, I'm anticipating buyers. I do think eventually this is just going to push up here to the 0.618 fib. Just like IWM, you just missed it by a hair. Okay, so, you know, I think it's extremely likely that we will get up there in the end after this pullback. I'm bullish on this pullback, guys. You know, words are not going to be tanking the stock market. I think we saw the worst of, you know, what was to come for now. Um, You know, I don't know if we're going to be taking out those lows the rest of the year. I really don't. I think we saw the worst of it. I don't think we're getting a crazy crash or anything. I think we are literally in an aggressive uptrend here over there on the weekly and daily charts, and we are getting reversion to the mean. Okay, so you know, over here, you already got that reversion to the mean on the, you know, off the 21 EMA and the 200 daily moving average over here on Friday. Honestly, it's not the worst looking thing. I wouldn't be surprised if everything else sold and GOOG just kind of consolidated here. And then when everything else started pushing back up, I would assume GOOG is going to now get that move up here to the 0.618 fib. All right, you just got to be patient on these things, but you know, some of them are set up better than others right now. GOOG is one of the better looking ones. Okay, above 178.13 is probably going to target the 0.618 Fibonacci retracement level around 183.63 resistance, right over there where you broke down from. Coming over here to NVIDIA. You got the bearish rising wedge as well. You started breaking down from on Friday, and I'm just going to say we're at least going to look for mean reversion back to the 21 EMA over here on the daily time frame, which is going to align with 137.40 support. Okay, that would be a break and retest level over here. That was, you know, you had this range going on here. You broke above it. I know you got sucked back down into it, but that was a false breakdown, and then boom, you started going off the races. Okay, so if you do pull back, we're definitely going to be watching 137.40 underneath 141.53. We're also going to mark out Friday's high underneath 141.53. You have 140.85, and then you have 139.62, and then 137.40. That's going to be a big spot. If you do not hold 137.40, all right, we are talking. You risk coming all the way back down here around 130, okay, 129. I don't think that's going to be the case, but it's definitely something that can happen. We could very well, you know, build something out like this over the coming weeks over here in NVIDIA. But clearly, you know, buyers are struggling, but taking things back up to highs, like especially in SPY and QQ, like they're struggling, which means we're going to need to pull back to bring new buyers into the equation, guys. The market is a constant auction. I like to call it the market auction. All right. Why? Because it's constantly buyers and sellers, and that's what creates supply and demand. Well, guess what? Okay, guess what? We've been struggling in this area over here on SPY and QQ for quite some time. You know, you're having these little moves up. This is like frustrating price action to trade. I understand, guys. Okay, I understand. But I'm telling you, if you get this pullback, you're going to bring a bunch of new buyers into the mix. And that's going to be a good time. All right, so just be patient. Over the next 2 to 4 weeks, we're going to have a really freaking good time on the long side. But things are probably going to pull back. Over here on Microsoft, all right? Underneath 473.52, talking 468.35, and then we have 462.52. That's going to be around that daily 21 EMA. If that does not hold, okay, we're talking you could potentially come all the way back down here. I don't think it's going to happen with how this is looking, but it's on the table. All right, you could even go sideways for weeks now and put in a flag just like that or just like that and then push up. Okay, we don't know, but I'm telling you right now, this is one of the strongest ones over here. It's at fresh all-time high. It's the only Mag 7. It is the strongest one. It's the only Mag 7 stock at all-time high. It's definitely been frustrating to trade. Look at these very small moves. It's just grinded higher up there. That's pretty frustrating. But you know, at the end of the day, if it does pull back over here, I'm anticipating it gets bought up. We're going to have to pair this up with where the market is. Okay, you do have this bearish divergence going on over here on the daily RSI. But you know, if the market's in the right spot, and this is right here, that's not looking bad. Underneath 462.52, you have 456. Underneath 462.52, you have 456.16, and then 448.38. And that's the next spot I would look for buyers off of, and that doesn't hold. You're watching this trend line, baby. All right, moving on over here to the trade ideas of the week. Oklo. All right, I'm just going to highlight the 4-hour chart over here. This thing looked phenomenal coming into the day. I know it's not loading right over here. We're going to let it do its own thing. Eventually, it's going to come back. Maybe so. Okay, we're going to move on. XOP. We'll come back to Oklo once the thing decides to load. Oh, what are we going to do? We're going to do that. Okay, we're going to hit it with the reset there and see if this thing would like to cooperate. There we go. Props to Greek Wi-Fi over here. I can't wait to be back in my setup. But that is that. Over here, let's see if we can load the 4-hour chart. There we go. You've got a picture perfect reaction off the 4-hour 21 EMA, guys. A lot of the time, this is what you get before another push up. Doesn't mean you're going to take out these highs. You know, maybe you just get something like that, and then boom, you end up pulling back all the way over here, and then you push up. But I'm just going to come over here, the weekly chart. So first of all, that looks like a bull flag to me. Doesn't look bad at all. If it's going to load, I'm really sick of this Wi-Fi, honestly, guys. I really am. I really am. But that's, again, with all the work I'm doing over here straight up, please leave a like. I have to put in like double the work because things just take, not double the work, but double the time. These things take freaking long ass amounts of time to even load my charts, and it pisses me off. All right, but trying to load the weekly chart. There we go. Closed out with a banger of a candlestick. All right, you had almost as high as volume over here, so heavy volume, guys. Well, what happened over here? You did continue higher the next week. So honestly, I think this can take out 71 and push up to 80 bucks next week. I think it's possible. Okay, and if it does pull back with the rest of the market, this is definitely top watch over here for me, or a top watch over here. I would like to buy it up off of 59.14. I did not get the entry over there on Friday, but I like July and August calls over here on Oklo. Okay, the nuclear theme, it's heating up and it's still probably going to keep heating up. And another ticker over there would be SMR to watch alongside Oklo. But Oklo is the leader over here. This thing had a $400 million offering announced, and guess what? It still got bought up. Okay, only down 1.27%. All right, coming over here to XOP. All right, now this is something that heavy volume, daily RSI is overbought, and normally I would say this thing's probably going to pull back because we could see it pull back right over here, pull back right over here. It marked the pretty much exact top when the daily RSI started getting over 70. Well, I'm just going to say this thing hit it with the break and retest off the 200 DMA. It reminds me of something like this. Okay, it reminds me of a bullish weekly chart over here. This thing is looking like a monster, and with what's going on, if it does continue going on over the next 1 to 2 weeks, this is very likely going to push up here. And I'm also just going to remind you guys of that principle we mentioned earlier in the video. When you get a range breakdown, a false breakdown, or a false breakout, you typically target the opposing end of the range. Maybe I didn't. I mentioned it in the Discord earlier. I don't think I mentioned it in this video now that I think about it. But we got a false breakdown over here of this big old range that stems for like 3 years, guys. Okay, this is a lot of time here that went by. Like 2.7 years went by over here. And now you got a weekly close above the 200 daily moving average. You're not quite extended above it as you were over here, but I do think this thing is probably going to start going for a ride. It reminds me of this kind of look over here where you just kept grinding higher. All right, but yeah, heavy weekly volume, heavy daily volume on Friday, and you got the weekly close above the 200 DMA, and we can see the weekly cloud is about to flip back to bullish. That reminds me of this over here. That reminds me of this right over here. It flipped back to bullish on that week, or at least the next week. Well, it's literally happening again. All right, deja vu, it's happening again. So I do think over here, oil stocks such as Oxy, they can continue performing. We're going to come over here to Oxy. If it's going to load, there we go. All right, and we can also see this thing did not test the 200 DMA yet. So I do think at least next week we are going to be testing 48 bucks, which is going to be right at that 200 DMA. It's technically 47.91 right now. Expect a test there next week. But real talk, guys. Oh, look at that. All right, I put that on my chart for a ticker request, I think a really long time ago. Yeah, right over there. Look at that. Okay, and yeah, it just took it looks like 2 months to actually hit that target. But there you go. You're back above 45.17, guys. You are, back above a key level right there. I honestly do think there's a chance that this thing takes out the 200 DMA and continues pushing. Like I said, all right, U.S. oil over there, U.S. oil and XOP, like these are looking like monsters right now, and we're probably going to be seeing further upside over here. If U.S. oil breaks above 78.42 over here, it could come up here. Like this is a pretty monster looking weekly candlestick, and you could have just started a larger push going on here. Okay, so keep the oil stocks on your radar moving forward over the next few weeks. Next one is going to be APLD. This thing right over here is pulling back into where it broke out from. You did have CRWV selling their warrants. They sold their stake in the company, which weren't shares. They were just selling the warrants, which tells us the selling right over here. It's not them selling shares onto the market. It is them it's demand. Okay, it's demand just showing that buyers are just stepping away from this thing. But I'm still going to argue over here, they still have the $15 billion deal in place over the next 7 years. This market cap is still pretty low. This market cap is still only $2.5 billion. There's proof of concept right there, a company awarding them that contract over there, or that lease agreement, that they're going to be getting that money, that revenue coming in. Well, guess what? All right, it's now returning to the scene of the crime. This is where you want to see buyers step in between here and down here. Okay, so I like July, I like August calls, especially August calls. Give yourself some time over here. I think you're gonna have a good time. I think we're probably gonna be retesting 1542 and pushing up to 1896 in the end. All right, but it is a higher risk play over here. It's just something I was waiting on the retest, and I did end up taking this guy on Friday. All right, next one's gonna be Carvana over here, guys. Carvana, you can play this thing short, but I'm going to also talk about the long setup that's going to be presenting itself, guys. Every time the daily RSI has gotten oversold since the bottom, the very bottom, you only got one. You got two, you got three tests. They all provided short-term bottoms, or you could have started looking for a base breakout or a reversal setup, okay, or a reversion to the mean setup, whatever you want to call it. All right, you could have been looking for it and playing it. That's what I'm going to be looking for and playing. The key levels that I'm looking for off of is 268.34. Follow the yellow brick road. If 268.34 cannot hold, we're coming down to 230.76, and I'm going to look for buyers to defend over there. You're going to have the 200 daily moving average. You have this break and retest level off at 230.76, and then you also have the 0.618 fib from this whole move up. If we're just going to be talking this move up, this most recent one, then guess what? This whole area is where you're looking for buyers off of. I just think it's very likely that if we do not hold here, we're probably just going to see this 200 daily moving average act as a magnet, okay? But on the weekly time frame, I am just going to point out you printed this candlestick right here. Notice how all of these times when you turn down from, oversold territory, once you started printing the first bearish candlestick, you at least got some further downside the following week. All right, so I would, expect we're probably going to begin for the downside. You just printed a, pretty bearish bar over here, probably at least going to return to the weekly 21, which is going to be around 268.34. So you can look for shorts over here down to that level and then expect a reaction off that level. But, it can not go like this, and it can just go like that and then provide a dead cat bounce for you to take another short off of. And then once it breaks on 268.34 again, then hey, it's time to start playing down to 254 over here, 0.618 fib, and potentially down here 200 daily moving average and 230.76 break and retest level. Okay, so that's Carvana, short and then long. I'm waiting on that long setup, okay, but it's also something that you can be shorting down there, or well, two down there. You don't want to short down here. You want to be long and down there. I think it's going back up to highs. PLTR, this was honestly the only one I'm really seeing that's showing like straight up strength here on like there's a few. Okay, I'll point out one more after this, but PLTR over here, this is definitely something that I assume is probably going to continue pushing it. If you see a pullback into, we're going to take off that level right there. If you see a pullback into 133.49, well, you know what we'll do is this right here, okay? We'll use this as your demand zone. There's your breakout zone right there. Okay, see a pullback between 133.49 and 135.28 this week. I think that's going to provide a buying opportunity over here. I do think this thing is getting ready to go. This thing has just been grinding higher. All right, and like, yes, it kind of looks like a rising wedge or an ascending channel here, but at the same time, this thing has been basing above the previous all-time high and is likely going to continue pushing. You did get a perfect reaction off of 140, guys. Again, if you don't have the correct levels on your chart that are getting reactions, please just take my levels. That's all you have to do. Okay, I do my best to kill it in this market. I do my best to prepare in this market. And I do my best to prepare all of you guys to take advantage of this market. Please take advantage of the levels I provide you and the analysis I provide. You're going to have a good time. Okay, 140. You got a picture perfect reaction on Friday off of 140. If it'll load, it's not going to load. Regardless, above 140, we're talking 145 and then 150. Those are the next psychological levels, okay? But you can see a picture perfect break and retest. It's not very often that you see a picture perfect double top thing like that. I think in the short term, we're going to push above 140 and head for 145 and 150. So that is PLTR over here. Another one over here that, it's just benefiting off of the whole situation there. Just like XOP was, I was pointing out that chart in the oil stocks, it's going to be MP over here. MP is something that I think is very likely going to target this 36.67 to 40.12 range up here. This is your, or not range, your zone up here. This is your supply zone. We're expecting sellers up there, but you hit it with the break and retest off the 200 daily moving average, just like over here. Notice how you get a lot of reactions, and then you just keep going in that direction of the trend. Well, you're probably going to, just like, you tested it. Oh, you kept going in the direction of 10. You almost tested it, you kept going. You tested it, you kept going. You tested it, you kept going down to new lows. Well, you're now in a reverse cycle, okay? You're in a bullish cycle over here. You just had the heaviest volume on the weekly time frame you've ever had over here. And if we come down to the daily, we're also going to see you also had the heaviest buy volume that you've ever had over here the past two sessions. This is probably going to continue pushing. I'm not going to say it immediately starts pushing. If you see a pullback into 29.72, between 27.29 and 29.72, I think it's very likely going to be bought up to new highs, okay? And then, yeah, I mean, I pointed out this is the supply zone you're going to be paying attention to. I think it is very likely going to start just continuing pushing up there, okay? So that's MP. All right, guys, that's what I have for you in this video. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you would like to come trade with me, I'm still in Greece, so I am running the 40% discount code for your first month. Use code GREECE. That is code GREEC. Okay, I gave you guys plenty of setups over here, plenty of value. Okay, people like to get mad that I mention my stuff. Guess what? I stand behind my product. I think you're gonna have a good time with it. I'm just in Greece, so I'm discounting the product. But nonetheless, I will be back literally by yeah, next Friday. I'll be back on 6/20. Everything will be business as usual. We're going to go back to killing. I'm doing my best to kill it abroad over here. I think we're doing pretty good analysis for you guys as well. But yeah, that is going to be 40% off if you'd like to come trade with me. I do trade live every day. Tomorrow I will be at the airport all day pretty much. And we have to leave this Airbnb at 11 a.m. and then be at the airport at 7. So there's a chance I stream tomorrow, but odds are I'm just going to be providing updates while sitting in the airport before the flight that is going to be at 11 p.m. All right, so have your expectations there. Not on tomorrow, but on Monday. Okay, I will be in the airport, so won't be streaming them. But yeah, guys, I look forward to crushing it with you guys next week. And honestly, guys, I do think if we get this next week of sell-off, I think it's going to produce a massive buying opportunity, a swing trade opportunity across the board on all these tickers we just mentioned. You can play, like I pointed out, Carvana. I would honestly be focused on that one short. Okay, that is really the only thing that I'm seeing that clear as day. We could see from past price action, you're looking for the downside. If you want to trade QQQ, okay, look for the downside over here, 521.95. You could trade puts down to the level. You could play shorts down to that level on pretty much all these tickers we just mentioned. There's some that I really wouldn't be touching short. There's Amazon, I wouldn't be touching short. IWM, I wouldn't be touching short. Meta over here, I think you're coming down to 662, 670. You could play that thing short over here, but again, like I'm just looking for the buying opportunity over here. You got Apple. I think this thing is probably going to be nice to play short down to 193.25. Tesla. I don't think anybody should be shorting it. GOOG. I don't think anybody should be shorting it. I think you're probably just going to consolidate here. You're right above a key spot, right at the daily 21, right at your 172.91 breakout level right over there, and then you're also right at the 200 DMA. I don't think it's the best short. Microsoft, it's aggressively strong right now. You do have the daily bullish divergence, but honestly, again, I wouldn't be expecting any, massive downside to come. This thing has gone straight up for quite some time. Any pullback has been bought up. It's unlike anything, we've seen over here over the past few weeks. It's not like the indices with this nonsense back and forth. Microsoft has continuously just grinded higher. I wouldn't be shorting it. Okay. So if you are going to short something, I think Carvana is an A+ short setup over here. That's really the only thing that I would be focusing on. But once that daily RSI gets oversold over here, guys, look for buyers to start stepping in. I will let you know about the setup when it comes. With that being said, I hope everybody has a lovely rest of their weekend. I hope you freaking kill it next week. And I will catch y'all in the next one. Peace.